Parshas Mishpatim. Last week's Parsha, Yisro, contained the description of the giving of the Torah, revelation. And this week's Parsha gets into details of the law, including the administration of justice. So we'll look at Perek Chav Gimel, which is chapter 23. We'll look at the first three psukim. We'll start with the second to set up the difficulty that looking at the first and the third might help resolve. So let's look at Pasuk Beis, that's number 2. Lo sihiyeh acharei rabim l'ra'os. Do not follow the majority for evil. V'lo sa'aneh al riv lintos acharei rabim lahatos. And do not respond to a conflict by inclining towards the majority to, not exactly clear, lahatos, to incline again, to pervert the law. It's not entirely clear. What's this talking about? Well, let's look at the context. The verse before that, which is Pasuk Aleph, verse 1, says, Lo sisa shem hashav. Do not carry the name falsely, which the commentaries say means either don't accept false witness or don't accept lashon hara, don't listen to evil speech. Al tashes yadcha im rasha lios ed chamas, and do not support with your hand. Do not lend support to an evil person who wishes to engage in corruption. Well, we see that we're talking about some measure of honesty in the administration of justice. So we can kind of get a clue about what the theme is at the beginning. And the final verse that we'll look at, which is the third of the triplet, that's Pasuk Gimel, that's verse 3, says, V'dal lo sehedar berivo. And a poor person, don't favor him in his conflict. So let's kind of look at the bread of the sandwich and then get into the sandwich. The bread of the sandwich is the first and the third psukim, which is don't engage in kind of a corruption of witnesses. Don't engage in a corruption of a perversion of justice by supporting people who will do things inappropriately. Don't accept false testimony. How you know it is and the details of this will leave for another time. But we're talking about making sure that the process of giving testimony and accepting testimony has integrity. And the third verse, which says, don't favor a poor person, well, the commentaries say, and Rashi says, a person might think, well, this is a way I can give a poor person who doesn't have the same level of, as a rule, doesn't have the same level of kavod, doesn't have the same level of respect in society that a better off person does. So a judge might feel, you know what, the guy's a miscane, he's out of luck, let me help him out here. His baldin, his adversary, or the person who's brought a complaint against him, he's wealthy, or whom he has brought a complaint against. The other person may be wealthy, he's poor. I'll give him some money, it'll benefit him. It'll make his life better in a way that's much more significant than any impact it'll have on a wealthy man. You can't do that. You can't do that because it's not true and it's not just. Even though our sympathies are with poor people, but you simply cannot pervert justice that way. Now, let's go into the verse that has somewhat awkward phrasing. First of all, it says, don't follow the majority for evil. What does that mean? So Rashi actually says that there's a technical halachic reading of this, which Rashi himself says quite explicitly doesn't fit the natural flow of the simple reading of the verse, but nevertheless it has legitimacy because Chazal, the rabbis, peg certain laws on certain verses, and it doesn't necessarily derive from the natural meaning, but the embedded meaning according to Torah Shabbat, according to the oral tradition. Here, as Rashi observes in Gemara and Sanhedrin and elsewhere, that when it comes to capital cases, that is where a person's life is at stake, if he loses the case, he loses his life, he'll be put to death. So for that, lo tiyeh acharei rabim l'ra'os. You shouldn't follow the majority. It doesn't mean you shouldn't follow the majority. It means you shouldn't follow a bare majority. So every Beis Din has an odd number of judges so that there can be a decision, a final decision. But there's a curious particularity in connection with a capital crime, with a crime that's punishable by death, which is if you have a Beis Din of 23, for example, a tribunal of 23, and the vote comes down to 11 to exonerate and 12 to convict, he's not convicted. And either somebody changes their mind as a result of discussion, we're going to get to that in a minute, or the Gemara says you keep adding 2 dayanim 2 additional judges each time until you get more than a bare majority. To convict, you need at least 2 more than you need to exonerate. To exonerate, a bare majority works. So according to that, the verse actually, although it sounds like it has 2 conflicting rules, one of them is don't follow the majority for evil, and then at the end it says acharei rabim lahatos, follow the majority. According to this reading, it means when it comes to a capital rendering judgment on a capital crime, a bare majority is insufficient. You need a majority of 2. To exonerate, acharei rabim lahatos, a majority of 1 is sufficient. Now, what about this thing in the middle? Lo sa'aneh al riv lintos acharei rabim lahatos. Even what words get associated with what words in that becomes problematic, and there are different opinions about that. There are some who say that it means straight up, Lo Saneh al Riv is written, normally the word Riv is written Resh Yud Beis. Here it's written Resh Beis. Riv means a dispute. Resh Beis, without the Yud, Rav means great, or the great one. And Rashi cites halacha, Lo Saneh al Rav lintos. Do not respond to the great one, the most learned one in your group. You shouldn't challenge him. Well, wait a second. If you're going to get an honest collection and expression of opinion, how could it be that you can't challenge the most learned of the judges? Then why do you need a tribunal? Just have a single judge. And the rabbis explain that that's why it is entrenched in the halacha that we start, especially in capital cases, we start with those who are of lesser stature, not the chief justice, not the most learned, but you start min hatzad, at the sides. You start with the younger, perhaps the less learned. They're learned enough to be on a basin, but they aren't the genius that might otherwise be at the head. So you get people to express their opinions before you ask the gadol, the greatest one, to express his opinion. Now, some say that that's out of kavod, and others say it's just a practical a method of getting honest opinions from people. A younger or less learned judge will perhaps stifle himself from expressing his real opinion if he knows he's differing with the most learned member of the tribunal. And so we don't want deference to be the price that we don't want to pervert an honest opinion for the sake of giving someone else on the tribunal honor. As a matter of fact, the commentaries say that if you see somebody, regardless of their stature, but if you disagree with them, you must express that. It has to be done the right way. But if you're in a place where you must judge, you have to express your opinion honestly. In fact, Targum Onkelos, the Aramaic translation of Onkelos, says that a person should not suppress his opinion, is what he reads from Lo Sa'aneh al Riv lintos. You shouldn't, when it comes to a dispute, lintos, to turn away and to say, you know what, I'm just not going to, I see what the lineup of opinion is and I differ and I'm just not going to get involved. And Onkelos says it's an obligation for a person to be truthful in what he has to say. This doesn't mean a person should not be diplomatic. It doesn't mean he should be disagreeable. As is often said, just because you disagree doesn't mean that you need to be disagreeable. But if you do not agree with the majority, you must express your opinion. Now, it could be that you express your opinion and you lose, in which case you're bound by the majority, just like everybody else is. But if you're talking about, in this, going back to the capital crime, there are certain cushions, certain protections that are built in. But now when we get to look at this verse in connection with juxtaposition to the next verse, which is Lo Sadar Dal Birivo, we don't favor somebody just because he is, in today's language, oppressed. We don't favor the oppressed over the apparent oppressor. We also don't favor the oppressor over the apparent oppressed. Everything must be evaluated on its merits. We have to be, you could say, ruthless in our pursuit of the truth. In fact, the Torah also says, Lo Sagurum Mipnei Ish, that a judge is not allowed to be afraid of the consequences of his ruling. He may issue a ruling that offends the powerful, and he may fear for blowback. But if he's in a position where he's administering justice, then truth and the correct application of the law, justice, is the most significant principle. It's the heaviest, it's the weightiest, it's the most important principle, even at the risk of someone's personal comfort. The bottom line is there are many factors involved in evaluating the merits of a claim. Some of them are not comfortable. It could be because of personal status of the litigants. It could be because of personal interest of the judge, even if it's not the kind that would disqualify him, but he would like to favor one party over another. And it could be in the court of public opinion, where somebody sees the entire community is going in one direction, but if you know it's wrong, then it is wrong to agree with the entire community. We have to preserve our own integrity. Now, of course, this is a real conflict. The Gemara in Brachos, I believe, talks about there was a dispute among the rabbis about when Yom Kippur was, and the chief rabbi instructed Rabbi Yeshua to show up on the day that Rabbi Yeshua thought was Yom Kippur with his money and his pocket and his walking stick. And he did. He complied. He disagreed. At the end, there was a ruling. Once there's a ruling, we have to follow the ruling. But if we're talking about convention, we're talking about opinion, if we're talking about justice, then a person must not join the crowd that is perverting justice, even if they are the overwhelming majority. If you have to stand up and defend the truth. Have a good Shabbos.